So this happened to me when I was around 9 or 12 years old. I'm over 30 now, and I must have told this story over 100 times. I've even shared it on the internet once or twice too, but haven't really got any comments, so I thought that I would share it here. Now, my family owned a pizza shop that was the first floor of this building. The second floor of the building is where my family lived. It was my stepfather, my mother, older brother, older sister, myself, and my younger brother. But the only way to get to the second floor was a staircase outside the building in the back parking lot. You would exit the back door of the pizza shop, walk 15 feet to your right, and walk up the staircase to get into the apartment where my family lived. Note too that we had a staircase in the house that led down to the front of the pizza shop, but it was always locked, and we mostly used that stairwell for just random storage anyway. So, when you would enter the apartment from the back door, atop the stairs from the outside, you would be in our dining room. To the right of the dining room was my mother's room. The dining room connected right to the kitchen, no walls or dividers. Beyond the kitchen was the living room, and past the living room was a hallway that led to mine and my brother's and sister's bedrooms. Note again that there were not a lot of windows in the apartment. We had 3 in the dining room, 1 in my mother's room, and my sister's room had 1 too. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway, and my bedroom that I shared with my brothers, they had no windows at all. If you were standing at the back door, in the dining room, you could see straight through to the kitchen, into the living room, and into the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The bathroom was off of the living room, but it's not really important to the story. Also didn't have any windows in it too. So, now to the actual story. So I woke up from a nap in my mother's room. It was around 11 p.m. because I saw the time on my mother's AM radio, and when I went into the dining room, the 11 o'clock news was on as well. I called out to my mother and siblings. There was no answer. I walked to the back door and I looked out to see my stepfather working in the family car. I turned around, and through the dining room, the kitchen, and the living room, I could see a light coming from the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The hallway had a high ceiling, so I could immediately tell that it wasn't the hallway on because the light looked more like something glowing in the hallway. I started to walk towards the hallway, and I made it into the kitchen when I see my sister come out of the hallway, and now that I see her, she's sort of glowing. She's wearing this nightgown that she usually wore to bed, but she was like 100% glowing. I thought that maybe she had a torch under her gown or something. I called out to her, but she didn't reply. She just tilted her head to the side, and I approached more, and she was now standing in the doorway of the kitchen living room. She never moved from the doorway of the hallway or the living room. I couldn't see below her knees at the time because the doorways weren't exactly across from each other, and the angle that she was at, her lower half was behind the edge of the couch. I said something else to her, at this point annoyed that she was acting weird, and I walked into the living room. Again, she said nothing and just tilted her head. Then she started to back up into the hallway and motioned with her finger for me to follow. So I did. She gets a few feet into the hallway, still motioning for me to follow and, glowing and all that. I got around maybe 8-9 feet away from her and could now see her lower half. And I still can't make sense of this, but she had no legs and was just floating. The bottom of her nightgown flowed around with no resistance, hitting nothing because her legs were not there. She kept motioning for me to follow, but at this point, I was hurriedly backing up and lost sight of her as I reached the doorway of the living room sort of kitchen area. The glow from her completely disappeared when I lost sight of her. It didn't just fade, mind you, it was just like it blinked and it was gone. And the instant the glow was gone, I heard the familiar bang of the metal back door of the pizza shop on the first floor, slamming closed, and I ran to check the back door of the apartment on the second floor to look out, and there I see my mother, my younger brother, and my older sister, who was in completely different clothing. I was stunned. I have no idea what I saw that day. I didn't go back into that hallway or my bedroom for at least a week as well. I told my family about this, and they all have no explanation too. My sister is still alive to this day. I really don't know if it was a ghost or demon or what. whatever it was, it completely freaked me out and changed my perspective on everything. A couple of things to mention too was that I was 1000% awake. I don't think I was hallucinating. I never saw whatever it was again, and as far as I know, nobody else saw it either. I've had other paranormal things happen to me, but not in that apartment, and not that blatant. Random things at the house my dad and my stepmother had, but yeah, it paled in comparison to this. So, that's my story, and I still don't know what to think about it. Any thoughts or opinions or anything that you would like to share would be greatly appreciated. Thanks. So I've been debating about sharing this story with anyone outside of my small circle of people that were there, but I want to share my experience in hopes that it saves someone's life or to give understanding of what someone else has experienced at the very least. So late fall 2010, in northern Canada, I went deep into the wilderness with my father and my eldest brother to hunt for moose. We left early in the morning, just before sunrise, trying to cover as much distance as possible before nightfall. We travelled winding rivers and had to repeatedly portage over rapids all day. But we decided to set up camp just after halfway to our destination. My father figured that we'd make the rest of the journey tomorrow. And well, when everyone bedded down for the night, I decided to go and grab some firewood and relieve myself down by the bank of the river, just out of reach of the light from the campfire. Out from the tree line, about 15 yards away, all of a sudden I could hear rustling in the bushes. I watched the area where I heard the noise and focused on that spot. All of a sudden, too, I felt kind of funny, sort of dizzy or lightheaded, and I could smell this putrid stink, like old milk or rotten food. Then I saw the tree start to sort of, morph and move ever so slightly and began to take the shape of a head and slight facial features. My eyes began to adjust to the darkness, and along the tree line I could hear this voice coming from there. I recognized the voice. It sounded like one of my relatives who had recently passed away. The face took the shape of my relative too. They said, "Hello, I've missed you. Come and see me." I smiled and I stepped forward a bit, but stopped to analyze the situation. My relative's face stopped smiling and became sort of emotionless. The skin began to turn pale and suddenly peeled away. Chunks of flesh from their cheeks began to fall away, and I felt shock and fear overwhelm my body. I couldn't make sense of any of this, so I started to back away and make my way back to camp. I didn't realize at the time that I'd been walking towards the voice, and I was further away from the firelight than I thought I was. The voice became angry and began shouting at me to come here, so I turned to run away, but as I looked back one more time, I saw the most disgusting thing that I've ever seen. It was rotting flesh on just gnawed bone, caved-in eyes and a hollow chest cavity. This humanoid creature was tall and super thin. At that, I ran as fast as I could, trying to yell for help, but the fear had made my voice quiet and raspy. I ran along the riverbank and I could hear the heavy breaths and the stomping feet from this thing right behind me. I made it onto the top of the riverbank, but it grabbed a hold of my leg as I jumped up. I gripped and tore the grass, trying to lift myself, and yelled as loud as I could. Then finally my voice came back and I yelled that someone has my leg. My brother woke up and ran over to where I was, then he pulled me up and took me over to the fire. I was terrified, trying to explain what I saw and that it looked like my relative, but not. I was trying to convince them that I wasn't seeing things, but my brother nodded his head and said, "I saw it too, I know." That solidified it. He acknowledged that it was real, and he must have seen it when he was grabbing me. We stayed up all night after that too, rifles loaded and close by. We packed up when the sun was coming up and we just went back home. We haven't shared that story with anyone out of fear of being labelled as crazy or liars. I know, it sounds unbelievable. I've had nightmares and I couldn't sleep for months afterwards. I would see these things, dark figures looking into my window, or hear whispers when I was walking home at night. Eventually, I began seeing this dark figure daily. In desperation, after trying to figure this out, I eventually went to medicine men or a shaman for help, but I've learned that the ceremonies only relieve it temporarily, I think. Friends have given me everything from protection pouches to crystals to you name it. I found out that there's a strong possibility that what I encountered may have been a wendigo. I learned that if you encounter one and survive, it attaches itself to you like a parasite. I've learned that it could only do this if it touches you, which it did. Ever since that night, I've been on edge when I enter into any forest or wooded area, which sucks because I really love being outdoors, hunting and in nature. But now, I always feel like I need to keep my back against something when I'm out in the wild, which is really frightening. Anyways, make your own conclusions about this. I've paid a price for being an ignorant child to the stories of old. As unbelievable as they may sound, some of them, I know for a fact now that they're real. I can definitely attest to that. This happened to me last year when I was home alone. My two older brothers are always out in our local church, which is pretty near to us. It's like one street away. But this day, we had no electricity. It was daytime. We couldn't pay our bill on time or something like that, so I was home alone, and I'll admit that I'm really not into church, like my brothers are anyway, because I'm just too lazy when it comes to religions and things that need me to go out and talk to people. I would always choose to be home alone, back then anyway. So yeah, I was home alone, no electricity, just using my phone, drawing stuff on my sketchbook, music, etc. My brother went home and he went straight to the bedroom, no word or anything at all. But it wasn't very fast. He walked like he would normally, with a normal face. So after a couple of hours, it was almost getting to night time. We do have some candles, but I couldn't find them, so I asked my brother, who was still not out of his bedroom. He came out quickly and went outside the house after he told me to follow him and fix the electricity. I was like, well, what? What's your plan? And he asked me to get the screwdriver and pliers. He taught me how to put the electricity back on when it's cut off. He told me to cut this hanging thing. It was a lock for this electricity meter or something. It's a circle-shaped thing that's attached to a wall in every house that has electricity. He told me to remove the seal after the lock and pulled out the whole cover. This revealed a plastic chip that was in between this metal that is supposed to be in contact with the cover. I just removed it, so I removed that chip too and put back the cover, and the lights came on. I was like, oh, wow, that's it? That was easy. My brother went straight back to his bedroom again. Then I received a call on my phone. Hey, we're going to spend the night here. You should come here. We got the electricity going and food here as well. My brother said. He was the one who was speaking. It was definitely his voice. I know my brother's voice. This voice is the one who just helped me fix our electricity, though. I told him, where are you? And he told me that he was still at the church. I said, stop, you're obviously joking. You're so lame. And I wanted to go into his bedroom just to throw a pillow at him, but I realized I'm not even hearing any voice from his bedroom while I was talking to him, which was really weird. He was talking normal, he was not being quiet. And I mean, really, I should be able to hear him inside, but there was no voice at all. I stood there sort of dumbfounded. I couldn't run, and suddenly my legs turned really weak. I didn't even want to make any sound at all, so I slowly, as a snail, grabbed my pants and really slowly walked outside while looking in every single corner that I could see. I began tearing up. My lips were shaking while I was thinking, if this is a prank, then man, this is a really good one. But as I found out later, it wasn't. It wasn't a prank at all. I arrived at the church trembling, even cried worse when I saw both my brothers. They'd never seen me cry like that before. I'm not even the crying type, really. But When I spoke to them, they confirmed that they had been at the church all afternoon. This is definitely one of the most weird, traumatic, and spooky experiences that I've ever had. And when I think about it, I've been with someone that I'm sure was not human. Whoever that was, it was not my brother. And I talked to him. I followed his orders to fix our electricity. I followed a non-human's command.
So I could give you a million times as a kid or as a young adult that I felt scared or paranoid playing in the woods. It's a beautiful place, don't get me wrong, and I spent my entire childhood getting lost, not literally, out there by myself or with friends. As kids, we never got too far out there, but you could actually see the progression of us venturing further and further out as we got older because of forts and carvings that we would leave. And this one particular time, like 1,000 times before, my friend and I had just graduated high school. It was our last summer of freedom, and we spent the entire summer camping and hiking out there. We decided to try and find a new place to set up camp, and walked for what felt like a few miles before we came to a nice clearing. The area was relatively new to both of us. We got the camp set up and fire going, and the plan was to just wait until nightfall, do a bit of smoking, and play some Monopoly. For the sake of backstory on my friend and I, my buddy is a smaller, real goofy guy, but comes from a family of foresters and always had a deep understanding of all the trees and different plants that you come across here. He had no fear of going and camping out by himself, too. If I spent like 10,000 hours in the woods, he must have spent like 50,000. As for me, I'm taller, a bit sturdier, and as we got older, I spent more time worried about women and sports, and the woods became a place for small parties. Also, I never had the balls to really camp out alone, so I never really did it. In fact, older me wouldn't really go far at all when I was alone because I could never shake the feeling of being watched out there, which I know was just paranoia, but still, it's an uneasy feeling. Anyways, camp is set, fire is going, but it's getting lower and needs some wood. Sun is down and we're both cutting up and having a good time. My friend is sitting on his little chair that he always brought and loading up, and I was crouched breaking some excess limbs off of some of the logs that we'd gathered for the fire, when all of a sudden this strong breeze cuts through the clearing. I couldn't tell you if it was the suddenness of it or what, but my friend and I sort of both stopped immediately and looked at each other. The breeze went just long enough to flicker our fire down to a small flame. We both sat completely still in almost total darkness. Neither of us said a word. When, across from us, on the other side of the fire, we could hear footsteps. They sounded like somebody was running and would slow down to a walk and then run again, definitely on two legs. By the sound of it, they were pacing sort of back and forth over the same spot. Then, just like it started, it stopped with a softer crunch on the underbrush. I knew by the sound of it that whatever this thing was, it had taken a crouch. I was crouched still and knew that I was staring right at it in the dark. My friend grabbed my shoulder and said, "Buddy," and when he did that, I felt this surge of fear come over me. I could feel it and hear it in him as well. I'd been so fixed on the footsteps and rationalizing what I'd heard that I hadn't even considered being afraid yet. But this was true fear. It was raw and made me feel helpless. I could hear my friend after a while grab some leaves and he dropped them on the fire. For the split second the leaves covered the fire, we were in pure darkness too. But then the fire sprang to life. We both quickly grabbed some more leaves and brush and threw it on the fire as quickly as we could. I got some sticks and logs on there, and neither of us took our eyes off the spot or moved much for like over an hour, I think. Finally, the leaves crunched and whatever it was, it slowly walked off. Which means that whatever was there, it had sat there crouched watching us without moving for far longer than Any animal I know would have. It wasn't until after the footsteps disappeared too that I realized the smell had disappeared as well. It smelled like a paper mill of all things. Spoiled eggs almost. For the rest of the night, besides whispered remarks, neither of us really moved or stopped looking at that spot. We didn't go into the tent, and I had a very short, light sleep sitting on the ground with my head rested on my hands. But my friend never went to sleep, and in the morning, we packed up and silently walked back home. To this day, too, we talk about it often. In the 7 to 8 years since it happened, my forester friend has not camped by himself out there since. And to be honest, I don't blame him. So this was my experience with the big killer clown panic of 2016. I think about it all the time and wonder what would have happened if I reacted differently and wasn't on my guard. So I, 6'2" male, was 16. I just bought my own car for like $1,000 from a buddy and took any chance that I had to drive it literally anywhere. So one weekend, I have a couple of days off work in a row. I decide I'm going to go drive an hour to the small town that I used to live in and see some of my old friends that still live in there. It's about maybe 6 p.m. by the time that I get into town, and I start calling some of my friends. No one's really answering yet, so I go to my grandparents' house and I say hi to them and just kill some time. Well, I'm there for a while and not a single one of my friends is free tonight. I'm kind of bummed out. My family is just talking about how everyone is freaking out about the killer clown sightings and whether it's real or not, and I'm over it, so I just decide to leave. Now it's about 8 p.m, just starting to get dark, and I stop at the only liquor or convenience store in town to get some cigarettes. I looked older than I was and never got carded in this tiny town. Except the door is locked, and I don't see anyone or many lights when I peek in the door. That sucks, but whatever. I don't need cigs anyway. I do think it's a bit weird though, as I've never seen that store closed like once in my whole life. As I'm walking back to my car though, I notice that it's weirdly quiet, even for this town. It was kind of foggy that night, so I can't see too far ahead of me, and of course I have killer clowns on the brain, so I get a little bit spooked. Then, what seemed like out of nowhere, I see a woman come into view near where the road meets the liquor store lot. She's walking towards my car, the only car in sight, and shouts to me. I can't tell what she's saying at first, but she gets closer and I make out bits and pieces. Apparently, she's petrified by the rumors of killer clowns. She tells me that 2 kids were just murdered down the street at the high school by one of them, literally half a mile from us. Obviously, I don't really believe her, but I keep listening. She asks first if I can give her a ride to her house. Instantly, I say no way. I know this town really loves drugs of all kinds, and I just don't trust it. She keeps asking, though, and won't leave me, so I say, how about this? I'll drive on the shoulder behind or next to you as you walk home, so if anything happens, I'll be there in my car. She says fine, and we start going. She's going super slow, though. I have my hazards on, driving half on the shoulder down the country road as she walks beside my open passenger side window. A couple of times she says something like, "Come on, can I just get in? I'm super scared." And I tell her that there are no killer clowns, there's no need to be scared, and I'm not going to risk my safety, and she shuts up. After maybe 10 minutes, we turn down a dirt road that ends at a clearing, and I stop the car. She says, "Okay, I see my house from here," and I say, "Cool, see you later." But then she freaks out and says, "No, you have to walk me to my house." She points to a big old farmhouse about 150 feet in front of us through the clearing. I say, "No, I'm done. I told you that I'd help you get home, but we're here. We can see your home right in front of us, and it just feels off." At this point, she gets super weird, starts sort of rubbing her body up and down as if to be sort of sexy, and keeps asking please, and implies that she'll do something for me I want in exchange. I put it in reverse at this point, start backing up, and she literally puts her arms in and ducks her head into my driver's window and sort of demands that I give her any money that I have. I don't really have any, so I just sort of shove some change from the pocket in my door into her hand and I peel out of there. As I'm backing up to the main road though, the whole time she's just staring at me, not walking toward her house. I drove an hour home and have been thinking about it since. I've always felt like if I walked up to her home that night, that there would have been more people waiting to do, well, whatever they wanted to do with me. Thankfully, I feel like I made a whole lot of right choices that night, and I made it out with just a spooky story.
So I live in a rather old apartment complex that was built back when the suburb that I live in was more rural. Because of this, the complex property is rather large with a lot of green space between each building, and all the buildings in the complex are arranged to be facing a large open courtyard type area. There are quite a few lights on the front of each building, but not many on the sides of the buildings, so the green spaces between each building are fairly dark at night. Anyway, so I took my dog out rather late one evening to give him one last opportunity to go to the bathroom before we went to sleep. Because it was so late, I decided to just hang around the green space next to my building instead of taking the dog for a proper walk around the courtyard area like I usually do. As I'm standing there while my dog heavily sniffs a patch of grass, I notice a guy dressed in all black walking on the opposite side of the courtyard. He sees me looking in his direction and he turns into one of the green spaces next to a building on the opposite side. I can faintly see the outline of him and I'm getting a little bit creeped out because he looks to be just sort of standing there in the darkness, doing nothing. After a few moments, I notice him light up a cigarette and I try and chill out, telling myself that he likely just needed a smoke and is hiding out there to keep from being seen, since my complex has a non-smoking policy. I go back to walking my dog around the green space next to my building, trying to coax him into doing his business. Eventually he finds a suitable spot and assumes position. I look away from him and I notice the smoker has put his cigarette out and he's now walking in a straight line across the courtyard directly toward me, staring directly at me. I'm panicking now, kicking myself for not bringing anything to protect myself with, and for stupidly thinking, who's going to mess with a woman walking an 80-pound dog? The 80-pound dog is currently crouching to do his business, and I'm not confident that he would stop to protect me. Suddenly, though, Smoker Guy takes a hard right and walks into the green space on the other side of the building, to the right of my building. My dog finishes what he's doing, and I initially go to get a bag out to pick it up, but as I'm pretty freaked out and I don't know where Smoker Guy is, I say to myself, you know what, to heck with this, and run back to my apartment and lock the door. I go over to the window that faces the area that I was just in, and peek out, just in time to see the Smoker Guy come out of the darkness right behind where I was standing. He had gone through the green space and behind the neighboring building so that he could obviously come up behind me where I was standing. I stood motionless next to the window watching him as he stood there for a second, and then began looking around by the front of the buildings, I assume trying to see if I was still outside. Eventually he started walking back toward the courtyard, and I grabbed my phone and called the cops. I haven't seen him since then, but I am worried that he lives in one of the buildings in my complex. I don't take my dog out that late anymore and have started carrying pepper spray with me on our walks. Hopefully, I never need to use it, but better to be safe than sorry, right?